The sound that started it all wasn't loud, just a faint printer hum cutting through the stale air of an overworked office. I remember it because it was one of those Friday nights where only the glow of screens and the smell of burnt coffee remained. My name, Elliot Crane, used to be printed on those patent drafts. Used to be. That night, it wasn't. The cursor blinked beside the words Provisional Application, Designed for Modular Neural Relay Interface. Under Inventors, I expected to see Elliot Crane, David Lorne. Instead, there was only David's name. Clean, centered, smug in its loneliness. I leaned back in my chair, the synthetic fabric squeaking like it, too, wanted to warn me not to trust my best friend. We had started this together. Two engineers in an old garage with a busted mini fridge and too many late-night takeout boxes. The first prototype had almost fried my laptop. I had laughed. David hadn't. He'd just said, "We're one revision away from history." That was 4 years ago. Now he was CTO, and I was lead systems developer. A neat way of saying the guy who stayed behind while someone else collected applause. That Friday night wasn't an accident. He had called in a quiet weekend sprint to polish documentation before Monday's shareholder call, the one where our patent would finally be presented. I'd noticed small signs weeks before, locked folders on the shared drive, a project subdirectory renamed from Crane Lorne Design to Lorne Core, tiny edits that seemed administrative until now. I opened the metadata. The last editor, David, timestamp, that afternoon. He'd waited until I'd left for lunch, a gutless move, quiet, premeditated, cowardly. I didn't call him, not yet. Instead, I printed the document, held the page under the cold fluorescent light, and stared at the black ink where my name should have been. The hum of the printer stopped, leaving only the distant buzz of the air conditioning. The paper trembled in my hand, not from fear, but from a kind of betrayal I hadn't tasted before. Saturday morning, the office was silent except for my sneakers squeaking on polished concrete. The city outside was overcast, soft gray light slipping through blinds. I came back early, before anyone else, because I wanted to see how deep this went. I unlocked my workstation, opened version control, and traced the commit history. It wasn't subtle. He'd forked the repository 2 weeks earlier, scrubbed contributor names, re-uploaded files under new author IDs. Even the internal comments that carried my initials, EC saw reviewed, EC modular override, had been replaced with DL final. The pattern was deliberate, surgical. He'd been planning this for months. I remember muttering out loud, "You arrogant bastard," as I copied the folder to a flash drive. I shouldn't have. But I needed evidence. I wasn't planning revenge yet, not consciously. At that point, it was self-preservation, documentation, insurance. By noon, I drove home, the flash drive in my jacket pocket. I couldn't shake the image of his calm smile from Wednesday's meeting, the one where he'd said, "We'll make history next week." I'd thought he meant we. I met David Lorne back in grad school at Stanford. He had the kind of confidence that filled a room and the kind of charm that made professors remember his name. I had the math. He had the mouth. Together, we made things work. We launched Sinra Labs from his uncle's seed fund, and the early investors loved him. The blonde, articulate tech visionary with quotes in Wired. I was the engineer who handled the back end. I didn't mind at first. I liked the quiet work, but over time, his tone changed. When I corrected his data during investor demos, he'd say, "Let me handle this, Elliot." When credit emails came in, he'd reply with "Thank you. Our team worked hard. Never Elliot and I." Looking back, I see the slope. It started shallow. Then one day, you realize you're buried under it. Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed at 2 a.m. A company-wide calendar invite. Shareholder presentation rehearsal, Monday 9 a.m. Sent by David. I stared at the invite description. Keynote overview by David Lorne, followed by team Q&A. No mention of me. The anger wasn't loud. It was clinical, precise. I spent the rest of the night drafting a single email to myself, time-stamping every change log, every edit, every deleted folder I had restored from backup. I attached the patent draft. I archived screenshots of every Slack conversation where he'd credited the team. Then I opened a blank email to David. I wrote, "Hey, just reviewed the final patent submission draft. My name's missing from the inventor list. Probably an oversight? Let me know when you've updated it before Monday." I didn't send it. Not yet. Because I knew how he'd respond. "Oh, it's just formatting. I'll fix it." I needed to see how far he'd go if I said nothing. Monday morning came too bright, too normal. Our office, top floor of a refurbished warehouse in Palo Alto, looked like any other startup. Exposed beams, overpriced coffee machine, branded hoodies on the back of every chair. I walked in at 8:45. David was already there, standing near the whiteboard, sleeves rolled up, silver watch glinting under the track lights. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. "Elliot, morning," he said. "You ready for the big call?" "Always, boys," I replied. My voice came out even, though my hands were tight around the coffee cup. He tapped the board where he'd drawn a flowchart of the system architecture, my architecture. "I'll walk through the patent overview, then open the floor. Keep your segment short. Investors like efficiency." "Your segment?" He said it like a teacher humoring a student. "Got it," I said. "Short and efficient." The shareholders joined the call at 9 sharp. Their faces filled the wall-mounted screen, 7 squares of suits and smiles, each one worth millions. I'd sat through enough of these to know the rhythm. Greet, pitch, reassure, excite, close. David started strong. "Thank you all for joining. Today I'm thrilled to present Sinra's latest patent, a modular relay interface designed to revolutionize neural connectivity." The slides clicked. My diagrams appeared. My notes, my annotations, scrubbed of my initials. He spoke with smooth precision, every phrase polished from our old brainstorming sessions. He even used my analogies. When he said, "We believe this system will allow adaptive signal modulation at unprecedented speeds," my jaw tightened. We. The first time he used that word in months. I kept my face neutral, nodding at the right times. Then the head investor, a man named Patel, asked, "Who's listed as the primary inventor on the application?" David didn't flinch. "I am. Not we, not our team, just I." Patel smiled. "Excellent. Congratulations, David." That's when I felt something inside me crystallize. Not rage, but clarity. You can only swallow so much before it turns to glass. I minimized the call window, opened Outlook, and drafted 1 email. 2. board@sinra.com. legal@sinra.com. CC David Lorne. Subject, clarification, patent inventorship documentation. Dear team, during today's shareholder call, the provisional patent for the modular neural relay interface was presented. Please note that the original design and implementation were co-developed by both myself, Elliot Crane, and David Lorne, as reflected in earlier version histories, commit records, and archived drafts. I am requesting immediate verification from legal regarding the submitted inventor list to ensure compliance with U.S. Patent Office disclosure standards, 35 U.S.C. CTI for 1 fit. Best, Elliot. I hovered over send. He was still speaking, his voice confident. Our projected rollout aligns with Q4 targets. I clicked send. The soft whoosh from Outlook was almost inaudible. But to me, it sounded like the beginning of something irreversible. David's tone faltered mid-sentence. I saw his eyes flick down to his phone, then back to the camera. His jaw tightened a fraction. I'll hand it over to Elliot for the technical deep dive. Smooth, controlled, but the muscles around his temple pulsed. I nodded and shared my screen. The first diagram popped up, the one labeled EC Modular Override V7. I watched as Legal's icon joined the meeting silently in the corner of the screen. The board noticed. David noticed. "Thank you, David," I said evenly. "I'd like to begin with the structural design that allowed adaptive signal modulation. The design I first proposed during our February offsite." He cut in. "We both worked on that." "Yes," I said, smiling faintly. "We did." The silence was surgical. I walked them through each subsystem, each line of logic that tied back to my commits. I didn't accuse him directly. I didn't have to. The timestamps, the version tags, the audit trails spoke for themselves. By the time I finished, Patel cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, we'll need to verify inventorship documentation before proceeding with further investor announcements." David nodded stiffly. "Of course, just a clerical thing." I didn't look at him. I closed my laptop, the hinge clicking like a period at the end of a sentence. The meeting ended 20 minutes early. He followed me into the hallway afterward, voice low but sharp. "What the hell was that, Elliot?" "Transparency," I said. "You should try it sometime." He grabbed my sleeve. "You think CCing legal makes you righteous? You just embarrassed both of us in front of the board." I pulled free. "I didn't remove your name from the patent." He hesitated, eyes darting toward the glass walls where the last few employees were packing up. "You don't understand the politics here. Having one name simplifies filings. It's just optics." "Optics," I repeated. "Good word. Legal loves that one." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing. "Look, we'll fix it. I'll talk to them. Just keep it internal, okay?" "Sure," I said. "Internal." But even as I said it, my phone buzzed. A new email. "Legal Department, verification request received." The machine had started moving. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the city lights. My phone kept vibrating. Messages from colleagues, LinkedIn connection requests, a text from an old professor. "Saw the shareholder leak. What happened?" Leak? I opened my laptop. Someone had posted the meeting minutes to an investor forum, complete with the line, "Inventorship dispute raised by Elliot Crane during presentation." I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't leaked it. Someone inside had. And whoever did, they wanted a spectacle. Tuesday morning, the office buzzed with tension. Conversations cut off when I entered the room. I caught snippets. Legal's auditing, patent dispute, he CC'd the board. David wasn't in his office. His door was closed, blinds drawn. I sat at my desk, opened my email, and there it was. From HR. Subject: confidential meeting request. 10:30 a.m. The air felt heavier. I stared at the message, wondering if this was the part where corporate machinery decided who lived or died. When I walked into the HR conference room, Mira, our HR director, was waiting. Polite smile, legal pad, voice practiced. "Elliot, thank you for coming. David's requested mediation regarding the patent communication sent yesterday." "Mediation?" I said. "He falsified inventorship." She nodded slowly, eyes flicking, to the recorder on the table. "Let's keep terminology neutral for now. Legal is reviewing." The door opened. David walked in, looking composed but pale. He avoided my eyes as he sat. Mira began. "Let's start by clarifying intent. David, did you knowingly omit Elliot's name from the provisional patent submission?" He hesitated. "It wasn't about omission. It was about timing. The submission deadline was tight, and Elliot hadn't signed the latest NDA revision. That was a lie. A smart one. Half true, half twisted. I had delayed signing the NDA because the clause added language giving him sole ownership of derivative designs. I leaned forward. So you admit you filed it under your name alone? He exhaled. Temporarily. Mira scribbled something. Legal will verify both claims. Until then, I advise both parties to refrain from further public statements. Public statements. The leak again. I realized this wasn't just an internal issue anymore. Investors were watching. Maybe even the press. As the meeting ended, David lingered near the door. You really think you can win this? He said quietly. I looked at him. I'm not trying to win. I'm trying to correct the record. That night, I called my brother. He's an attorney. Was technically before burnout sent him into teaching. He listened while I explained the situation. When I finished, there was a long silence. Then he said, Elliot, do you still have the original Git commits? I do. Good. Print everything. Screenshots, backups, email chains. Don't trust cloud access. If he controls admin, he can alter metadata. And whatever you do, don't let them convince you to sign any settlement before legal finishes their investigation. I nodded, pacing my apartment. You think he'll try to settle? He'll try to buy silence, especially if the patent's worth what I think it is. I looked out the window at the lights of Palo Alto, the hum of traffic below. The patent was the company's future. Whoever owned it would control licensing, partnerships, everything. He's not getting it, I said. Wednesday morning, my badge didn't unlock the main lab door. Access denied. I stood there for a few seconds, blinking at the red light. Then again, red. Again. Elliot, a voice said behind me. It was Maya, one of the junior devs. She looked nervous. They'd changed access levels overnight. Said it was temporary. Right, I said, forcing a smile. Temporary. I walked to my desk. My login worked. Barely. Half my folders were restricted. Internal chat channels archived. It was a subtle freeze-out, the kind that kills you quietly while pretending it's policy. I forwarded everything to my personal email. Not company data, just my communications with legal. Then I sat there, watching the cursor blink in a half-empty inbox. This was war now. Not loud, not violent, but bureaucratic. Digital, procedural, the kind that leaves no smoke, only silence. That evening, as the sun set over the bay, I got a message from legal. Subject: Inventorship Audit Update. Dear Mr. Crane, preliminary review confirms that prior drafts of the patent application list you as co-inventor. Additional verification of version control logs and repository metadata is ongoing. Please do not engage external counsel until review completion. Regards, Sinra. Legal relief, brief and fragile, hit me like a short inhale after drowning. But beneath it was something else. Awareness. If they were warning me not to get external counsel, it meant David already had. I poured a glass of whiskey, sat on the couch, and scrolled through old photos on my phone. Us in the garage, laughing, surrounded by wires and coffee cups. Back then, he'd called me partner. Now, I was a liability. Somewhere between the photos and the silence, a thought formed. Quiet, deliberate, cold. I wasn't just going to defend my name. I was going to make sure everyone saw how he'd tried to erase it. That's how it began. The first thread in a corporate war I never wanted to fight. And by the next week's shareholder call, when legal finally responded to the board with their findings, David would learn what happens when the quiet engineer finally speaks up. By Thursday morning, Sinra Labs didn't feel like the place I'd helped build. The same office where we used to joke about broken prototypes now hummed with quiet suspicion. The espresso machine hissed every few minutes, but nobody laughed anymore. Conversation stopped when I entered the break room. That's how companies handle scandal. Not with confrontation, but with avoidance. People fear contamination. When I opened my email, the header at the top made my chest tighten. Subject: Internal review meeting. Attendance mandatory. Time: 3:00 p.m. Attendees: David Lorne, Elliot Crane, Sinra Legal, HR. 3 o'clock, the execution hour. The morning crawled. I tried to work, debugging the neural interface code, reviewing signal lag data, but every keystroke felt mechanical. Around noon, Maya stopped by my desk, hovering awkwardly. "They're saying you might sue," she whispered. I looked up slowly. "Who's saying that?" "Just people. Slack threads. You didn't hear it from me." I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, Maya. I'm not suing anyone. Yet." She flushed. "I didn't mean—" "I know. It's fine." But inside, I was thinking about what my brother had said. They'll try to make you the problem. At 2:58, I walked into the glass conference room. David was already seated, back straight, hands folded. He looked immaculate. Light gray suit, polished shoes, no trace of the sleepless nights he must have had. Legal was there too. Andrea Wu, company counsel, and Mira from HR. Andrea greeted me with professional neutrality. "Thank you. Elliot, please sit." I did. The conference table was long enough to make me feel like I was testifying. David spoke first. "Before we start, I just want to say this whole situation's been blown out of proportion. Elliot and I have worked together for years. I'd like to resolve this amicably." Amicably. Like this was a misunderstanding between friends, not intellectual theft. Andrea nodded. "The board has requested a factual review of inventorship and intent. We'll begin by examining the project timeline." She pulled up a screen share of the repository history, the same logs I'd printed days earlier. "Mr. Crane," she said, "is this your contribution to the relay interface?" "Yes." "And you can verify this commit as yours?" "Yes." She nodded. "Mr. Lorne, do you dispute that?" David smiled slightly. "Of course not. Elliot did great work, but final integration, testing, and patent-level design decisions were handled under my supervision. The system as filed is distinct from the early prototype." That word, distinct, was calculated. If legal bought that, he could argue the filed version was an evolution, not my original invention. Andrea looked between us. "Did either of you sign an agreement delineating inventorship ownership during development?" David spoke first. "We had verbal understanding. Nothing formal." I said, "I signed a contributor agreement that explicitly covered co-inventorship for derivative designs, February 2021. Andrea typed something, expression unreadable. "We'll verify that." The meeting dragged for nearly an hour. By the end, it was clear Andrea wasn't ready to side with anyone yet. "We'll continue auditing records. In the meantime," she said carefully, "we ask both parties to avoid external communication about this matter. Media inquiries should be redirected to PR." David exhaled with visible relief. "Of course. Thank you, Andrea." I stayed silent. When we walked out, he waited until the hallway cleared before turning to me. "You're playing a dangerous game, Elliot." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what you said before the investor demo 2 years ago." He smiled. A tired, tight smile. "You think you're the victim here, but you're not. The company needs a single face, and the board made that clear. You can't build trust with two inventors arguing about credit. So you erased me. I streamlined the presentation." I stepped closer. "You lied." His eyes hardened. "I built Sinra while you were debugging circuits in a garage. I dealt with investors, lawyers, contracts. You think that makes you equal? You think code makes you a founder?" There it was, the truth behind every thin smile, every team email. I said quietly, I think honesty makes me one. Then I walked away before I did something that would cost me everything. That night, I sat on my apartment balcony watching the fog crawl over the city. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Crane? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Rachel Lynn from Harrington and Rowe, LLP. We represent several minority investors in Sinra Labs. May I ask, are you currently represented by counsel? I hesitated. Not officially. We'd like to schedule a confidential discussion, off record, tomorrow morning? About what? About corporate governance, disclosure, and potential misrepresentation to shareholders. You were CC'd on a call that raised some concerns. So the shareholders had noticed. 10 a.m., I said. Where? Downtown Palo Alto. We'll send details. Please bring any documentation you feel relevant. When I arrived the next day, the firm's office was cold and minimalist. White walls, glass doors, city views. Rachel met me in a conference room that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner. She was mid-30s, sharp, calm. Elliot, I appreciate you coming in. I'll be direct. Investors are concerned about possible false statements made to the board. If David misrepresented inventorship on a filed patent, that's securities fraud. The word hit like a weight. Fraud. I didn't leak the call, I said. She smiled slightly. We know, but someone did. Likely from inside the investor group. They're using this as leverage. What we need to know is simple. Do you have documentation proving your co-inventorship? I handed her a USB drive. Every version history since 2020. She plugged it into her laptop, eyes scanning the file list. Good. This could protect you. But understand, once this becomes formal, you'll be under pressure. NDAs, counterclaims, maybe retaliation. I nodded slowly. Already started. Then you'll need allies, she said. When legal finishes their audit, we'll make sure the board sees it first. Do not speak to press, do not sign anything, and document every internal message. Understand? I do. That weekend felt endless. I tried to distract myself. Runs along the Bay Trail, cold dinners, mindless TV, but my head stayed in that glass office. I could still see his face when the email hit mid-call. Shocked, furious, betrayed. Late Sunday, I got another message from Mira, HR. Subject, upcoming personnel review. Message, please prepare a brief statement summarizing your contributions to the Neural Relay project and timeline of involvement. Personnel review. That was corporate code for potential termination. I stayed up until 3 writing that statement. Not emotional, just factual. Dates, documents, screenshots, email excerpts. When I was done, it read less like a memo and more like a confession. Not to them, but to myself. Monday morning, Sinra Labs was crawling with auditors, people from legal moving between offices, holding clipboards, whispered conversations in corners. It was the smell of panic disguised as professionalism. At 10, Andrea called me into her office. Her tone was gentler this time. Elliot, the audit is nearly complete. Preliminary findings confirm dual inventorship. The final report goes to the board tomorrow. I exhaled. So it's official. Almost, she said. But David's already pushing a narrative that you delayed filings, risking company IP. He's framing this as damage control, not deception. Of course he was. He couldn't win on facts, so he'd pivot to spin. Can I see the report? She hesitated. Not yet, but I can tell you it doesn't look good for him. Then what happens? She looked tired. The board decides whether to amend filings and disciplinary action. But be careful, Elliot. David still has allies. That night, I got a message from David. Subject, can we talk? Body, off the record, no lawyers, just us. Against my better judgment, I replied, tomorrow, after the board meeting. Tuesday morning, the board convened in the executive conference room. I wasn't officially part of it, but Andrea asked me to wait outside. Through the frosted glass, I could hear muffled voices. David's calm tone, Patel's clipped questions, Andrea's measured responses. After 45 minutes, the door opened. David walked out first, face unreadable. Andrea followed. She handed me a sealed envelope. Board decision. Effective immediately, patent records will be amended to list you as co-inventor. Internal disciplinary action is under review. HR will contact you about next steps. I stared at the envelope. So I'm reinstated? She smiled faintly. Vindicated might be a better word. He was waiting for me in the parking garage, leaning against his Tesla, tie loosened, eyes hollow. You win, he said softly. It's not a game, I replied. He laughed bitterly. It always is. You just learned how to play. Then maybe you shouldn't have bet my name. He stepped closer. Do you think any of this matters? Investors don't care who invented it. They care who sells it. You think legal's audit will change who they listen to on stage? I didn't answer, because he wasn't wrong. In the public eye, charisma still outweighed truth, but he wasn't finished. You CC'd legal to make a point. You wanted to humiliate me. I met his eyes. No, I wanted to stop you. We stood there in the concrete silence, exhaust fumes drifting by. Finally he said, Enjoy your victory. It's lonely up there. Then he got in his car and drove away. For the first time in weeks, I slept. Deeply. When I woke, I thought maybe it was over. But it never ends that cleanly. 2 days later, Rachel Lynn called. You might want to sit down, she said. Why? There's been a shareholder filing. Someone leaked the audit report to the press. It's trending under Nanjum patent scandal. I opened my laptop. There, it was headlines everywhere. Tech startup faces inventorship dispute ahead of IPO. Insider sources claim internal sabotage at Sinra Labs. And there, in bold text, engineer Elliot Crane alleges co-founder falsified records. I hadn't spoken to a single reporter, but it didn't matter. I was now the story. By afternoon, my inbox overflowed. Media requests, former colleagues texting, Man, you okay? At 5, Andrea called. The board's furious. They think you leaked the audit. I didn't. I believe you, she said, but optics are bad. They might suspend both of you pending review. Both of us? Equal treatment. PR protocol. I laughed, sharp, humorless. So doing the right thing gets you punished. That's corporate law, Elliot. Justice isn't the same as order. That evening, I went for a walk through downtown, phone buzzing nonstop in my pocket. The air smelled like rain and exhaust. The world felt both small and enormous, like every window could be looking in. Outside a bar, I saw a familiar silhouette. David, nursing a drink, staring at his phone. He looked older somehow, worn down. I almost kept walking, but something in me stopped. I walked up beside him. You shouldn't be out here, I said quietly. They'll think it's staged. He chuckled. You think I care about optics now? I sat down. We didn't look at each other, just silence, broken by distant traffic. Did you leak it? I asked finally. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, No, but I know who did. Who? One of Patel's analysts. They wanted leverage before the IPO. I studied him. He wasn't lying. Not entirely. He turned his glass. You think you won, but they're going to gut us both. They'll restructure, rebrand, maybe bring in new leadership. They'll keep the patent, though. They always keep the patent. I said nothing. He sighed. We built something incredible, and we destroyed it with ego. I looked at him then. You destroyed it with greed. He nodded slowly. Same difference. That night, I got a final email from Andrea. Subject: Board Action Summary. Sinra Labs. Elliot, the board has decided to postpone IPO proceedings pending resolution of the media situation. Both you and David are placed on administrative leave with pay. Your inventorship claim stands validated. Ownership stakes remain unchanged. Official statement will read, internal review completed, corrective measures implemented. Best, Andrea. I stared at that line for a long time. Corrective measures implemented. That was their way of saying justice had been done, in 10 corporate syllables. But justice wasn't what I felt. It was exhaustion. The company would survive. The patent would survive. But the friendship, the trust, the quiet faith that hard work mattered, those were gone. Still, somewhere inside I knew wasn't finished, because the truth hadn't reached the people who deserved to hear it most. The ones who'd invested, believed, built alongside us, and I had a plan for that. The week after my suspension felt like being trapped underwater. Emails kept coming, not from Sinra, but from journalists, old professors, LinkedIn strangers. I didn't reply to any of them. I stayed in my apartment, curtains drawn, surviving on instant noodles and the dull rhythm of news alerts. Every story twisted the facts a little more. Rogue engineer claims credit after filing dispute. Founder feud threatens billion-dollar IPO. I watched the headlines change. Watched my name morph from victim to villain, depending on which outlet needed clicks. But what hit hardest wasn't the articles. It was the silence from the people who used to call me friend. No one from Sinra reached out. Not even Maya, until Friday. At 8:43 p.m., my phone buzzed with a message. Maya, you didn't hear this from me, but they're rewriting the internal narrative, saying you only worked on peripheral modules, not the core relay. I stared at the text, the anger low and steady. Of course they were. They couldn't erase my name from the patent anymore, so they'd erase it from the story. I typed back, "Thanks, stay out of it. They'll come after anyone who talks." She sent one last line. "They already did. They locked my repo access today." By Sunday, the public drama had settled into a simmer. The tech blogs moved on, but I couldn't. Because deep in the noise, something was wrong. The audit report that had cleared me, the version posted publicly, had been edited. The timestamps were off. My earliest commits were missing. Someone had redacted my code history. I called my brother that night. "They're rewriting digital history, Autumn," I said. "Then make it physical," he replied. "Print the truth." That's when I remembered something David didn't know about. A local backup drive in my home workshop. It contained every nightly build from the early days. Not cloud logs, raw files. I drove there the next morning. The workshop was dusty, half forgotten. The smell of solder and machine oil still lingered. I powered on the old desktop. The fans wheezed to life. The monitor flickered blue. In the root directory sat a folder labeled Relay Legacy. Inside, the proof, timestamps, metadata, design diagrams with my initials embedded, unalterable. I uploaded everything to an encrypted drive. Then I drafted an email. Not to the board this time, to every single Sinra employee. Subject: the real story behind the relay interface. Colleagues, you've heard rumors, you've seen headlines, but before this narrative disappears behind NDAs, you deserve the truth. Attached are archived project files, commit histories, and correspondence showing the full inventorship record for the modular neural relay interface. These predate Sinra's corporate formation and reflect our original collaboration, not the rewritten version circulating internally. I share this not for revenge, but for transparency. The technology we built was meant to change how humans and machines connect, not to become a case study in how trust gets patented away. Elliot Crane. I read it 3 times. Then I hit send. It was reckless. Career suicide, maybe, but it felt like exhaling after months of holding my breath. Within an hour, my inbox exploded. Some responses were supportive. Thank you for saying it. Others warned me, you're violating confidentiality. And one from David. David, you just destroyed both of us. Hope you're proud. The next morning, the company Slack leaked the email thread. By noon, TechLedger published a piece quoting my letter. The headline wasn't flattering, but it was honest. Engineer releases evidence of patent erasure inside Sinra Labs. The article went viral. Investors demanded an emergency board session. Legal issued statements about unauthorized disclosures. HR issued mine. Employment terminated due to violation of confidentiality agreements. And still, I didn't regret it. Because that same afternoon, a message came through my spam folder from USPTO, Inventorship, uspto.gov. Subject, Inquiry regarding patent application, number 78341 MLR. Mr. Crane, recent evidence submitted has triggered a provisional review of inventorship claims associated with Sinra Labs application. Please confirm your cooperation with our office. I sat there staring at the email, barely breathing. The patent office, the real authority. For the first time, this wasn't an internal war. It was federal. 2 weeks passed. Sinra went dark online. Their site redirected to a placeholder page. We're making some exciting changes. I'd seen that kind of rebranding before. It was what companies did before dismembering themselves. Then one morning my brother called. You should check the Federal Register. I pulled it up. There, under Notices of Correction, was a line. Patent Application, number 78341 MLR. Inventorship Correction filed. Inventors, Elliot Crane, David Lorne. My eyes burned. After months of silence, red tape, and gaslighting, there it was. Official. Immutable. I printed the page. The paper felt heavier than it should have. Later that week, Rachel Lynn invited me to coffee. She looked lighter, almost amused. Congratulations, Mr. Crane. You realize you just made a precedent? Patent Office rarely intervenes on corporate filings. I smiled faintly. Guess they don't like being CC'd either. She laughed softly. What's next for you? I thought about it. The idea of returning to Sinra made my stomach twist. Even if the board begged, I couldn't walk those halls again. The trust was gone. The name might be restored, but the meaning wasn't. I'm starting something. Smaller, I said finally. Just engineers. No founders, no PR decks. Real work. She nodded. And if David tries to claim your new work? He won't. How can you be sure? I sipped my coffee. Because he finally understands what it costs to erase a name. Months passed. The story faded from headlines, buried under the next scandal. But sometimes, I still caught glimpses of it, reposted on legal blogs, cited in business ethics lectures, whispered about in startup circles. They called it the Sinra lesson, a cautionary tale about hubris, trust, and how far a quiet man will go when his work, his identity, is stolen. As for David, I never saw him again. Word was he resigned quietly after the board replaced him. A friend said he joined another AI company overseas under a different title. I didn't follow up. I had my own lab now. Small, messy, loud. A handful of young engineers who believed in open source integrity. We joked about CCing legal whenever someone saved a new prototype file. It became our running mantra, a warning, a memory, a code of honor. And some nights, when the office was quiet and the last monitor glowed against the dark, I'd find myself looking at the framed patent certificate hanging on the wall. 2 names, equal font, equal space, That was all I'd ever wanted. Not fame, not revenge, just fairness. But there's one thing I'll admit, here, privately. The part I never told anyone, not even my brother. The night before the patent correction went public, I got an email from David. No subject, no greeting, just 2 words. You won. I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed back, no, we lost. And I meant it, because in the end, the technology survived, but the friendship didn't. The company lived, but the integrity we'd built it on died somewhere in that conference room the day he erased my name. That's the part nobody patents, the human cost of ambition. And maybe that's why I tell this story now. Not for sympathy, not for vindication, but as a reminder that the quietest sound in the world isn't the hum of a printer or the click of a send button. It's the silence that follows when trust is gone. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.